while people are in tragedy, what can help you get through? And I say it's lean into those people that care about you and want to be with you. And it's such a powerful force. So my cousin and my other family members really, really helped me during that time. And I look back at that and I'm like, wow, without them, I can't imagine what I would have been. I was a physical wreck to begin with.
This is Sheila's Take, a podcast where you can hear my take on everything: love, hate, relationships, family, and today's issues with a godly perspective. I'm your host, Sheila Dunbar. Thank you for joining me. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Sheila's Take. And today I want you guys to meet Bob DePasquale. He is a purpose-driven impact maker who firmly believes in the power of making positive differences in our world. Bob's life took an unexpected turn when at the age of 18, he was diagnosed with cancer, just days before the tragic events of September 11th, 2001. The physical healing happened miraculously within just 4 months, but the mental recovery took years. It was during this journey that Bob realized the significance of his battle with cancer and the losses his family endured during 9/11. Now, Bob's mission is to inspire others to find the silver linings amidst tragedy and utilize their unique gifts to uplift those in need. So get ready to be inspired as we dive into Bob's incredible journey and learn how his experiences have shaped the lives of others. Bob, welcome to Sheila's Take. How are you?
I am wonderful, Sheila. Thank you so much for having me. And the mission of your show is very, very well aligned with what I like talking about. So this would be a good one.
Good, good. Now I know a little bit about your background, but tell me, how did your diagnosis with cancer and the events of September 11th impact your perspective on life?
Wow, that's a deep question. And if I'm being honest, I don't know if I can fully answer it yet, because those events in my life, Sheila, I think about them every single day. And
Okay.
that's not an exaggeration. And we'll probably get into a few stories as we record today. And I will not exaggerate about anything. And I will definitely not exaggerate that on a daily basis. I think about that time in my life. And the way that it has affected me more recently is it has driven me to use my gifts and skills to make the world a better place and to help other people and other organizations build cultures of generosity, because I truly believe that it was generosity, not just medical advances in technology and not just my own determination to recover from an illness in such a terrible time in our nation's history. But it was also the generosity of the people around me that helped me recover and ultimately have helped me really get through the past 20 years. So it's really been quite a journey. So that's how it's done so far. And I'd be happy to report back on the next decade once it happens.
Well, why don't you just explain exactly what happened?
Sure. So can I start with a question? I like to start with a question.
Okay, sure.
Have you ever had a time in your life where you felt invincible, like you just felt on top of the world, nothing could take you down?
Yes. Yeah.
You've been there. And
Yeah.
I would assume most people listening do. And a lot of humans have that feeling from time to time in life. And most of us have it, especially when you're a young man. You have it when you're a teenager and you think like you have your whole life in front of you and you can do just about anything and you're indestructible. And that was me at age 18, Sheila. I was the kid. I wouldn't call myself risky or a daredevil, but I was just very, very confident in my ability to get things done. I didn't have a problem taking risks. And so I guess you could call a small risk in my life at the time was when I graduated high school. I grew up in South Florida since I was 3 years old. I was actually born in New York and I moved down here, and I still live here to this day, into South Florida. But I wanted to do something for college that was different than just South Florida. Although I love it here, I love the weather, I love the people, I love the culture and diversity, but I wanted to do something different. And I had an opportunity to go up to Hofstra University, which is on Long Island, New York.
I know that exactly.
Okay, so Hofstra, you probably know Hempstead and Union.
I know it. I used to live there. I used to live in Hempstead.
Oh, really? Oh, wow, that's great. So we might have been neighbors. So I was there for 4 years. Well, my freshman year, I was like, oh, this is a great opportunity. I can go up to New York. I can play football because I had an opportunity to play football there. I can see a lot of my family and my cousins, aunts, and uncles that I just never really spent that much time with because I grew up in South Florida. And then somewhere in that mix was an education. I'm sure my parents probably would hope that it was at the top of the list, but
Right.
it was on the list. Nonetheless, though, I thought, man, I felt so blessed. I have such an awesome opportunity in life to do those three things and be that 18-year-old kid, super confident. So I went off to college, and, you asked how this whole thing happened. I mean, it's a long story, but it's worth telling because, it's like nothing you could ever expect when you're an 18-year-old going off to college. So a training camp in college for football is a lot different than anyone who maybe has played high school football or other levels, but it's about a month long. And back then the rules were less strict than they are now. And it was a really, really challenging thing. I mean, we would practice 2 and 3 times a day. We'd be up early in the morning, to bed late at night, lifting weights, practicing, watching film, watching more film, chalk talk, all the things you need to do to be a good college football player. And so it's very, very taxing on the body. But pretty early on in training camp, I came up lame with what I thought was a groin injury. And my next question for you and the audience and anyone out there is, have you ever pulled a groin muscle before? And I hadn't to that point in my life.
Yeah.
And I thought it was the most debilitating thing in the world. I mean, you think, okay, a groin muscle, it's not your quad, your hamstring, or your, it's not like a main muscle. But yeah, you can't sit, stand, twist, bend over. I mean, it's a very, very debilitating injury. And so mentally, that was really taxing on me because I was trying to prove myself to my new coaches, to my new teammates. I'm the little freshman kid from Florida trying to prove myself. And so, Sheila, I would do this rehab exercise where early in the morning in training camp, I would sit on this 3-wheeled stool and I would shimmy across this massive training room, that had like 50 to 100 people in it on any given morning. And I suppose part of the exercise was to strengthen like the muscles in my hips and that area of the body as I kind of pushed this stool across the floor. And I was doing it for like almost a week. And I was like, I'm not getting any better, And one day, our head trainer, who was a small guy, like 5'6", 120, 30 pounds soaking wet. And in order to get everyone's attention, because it was so loud and boisterous early in the morning when everyone's getting treatment and getting ready for practice, he would stand on this box. And I remember him just like cupping his hands and screaming my name, Bobby. They called me Bobby back then. Bobby, quit being a weakling and get back out on the field. Like, you got to go practice. And I'm like, oh, come on, the head trainer's calling me out. I feel like such a loser. And I ended up having a more serious conversation with him. And he's like, you know what? You're not getting any better. And I'm like, yeah, obviously. And he sends me to the doctor. Now, I'm an 18-year-old, so technically I'm an adult, right? Because, by age. So for about a week, or maybe almost 2 weeks, I'm driving around Long Island like every day, going to all these different doctor's appointments, ultrasounds, CAT scans, sonograms, MRIs, every test in the book to try to figure out what's going on. And, you go into the doctor's office and I had to fill out this is not digital, those little tablets they have.
I know. You got all those papers. Yes.
I don't even know. That. I don't know the answers to I don't know what my insurance numbers are. I don't even know what insurance is. I'm 18. So I filled out all this information, trying to call my parents, get help. So I'd be in these appointments for hours. I mean, it's not fun, like boring, like definitely not my vision of what my first month of college would look like. Right. So I'll never forget this, though. The day that my parents were coming up for my first ever game, this was towards the end of training camp. So it was a Thursday. Now, we knew I wasn't playing in the game at this point because I was injured and something was wrong. But I had this appointment, and typically these appointments would take hours, but this one went abnormally fast. I mean, I walked into the office. It's like they were waiting for me to be there. It's like, it was almost like they expected me to walk through the door at the moment. They called me right back. Right. And my parents were supposed to fly up that morning. And so I go into the appointment and the doctor sits me down. He's in the office 30 seconds after I get in the office. So I didn't have to wait very long for him either. And he sits me down, he looks me dead in the eye. And he says, Bobby, you have cancer. And I mean, I was flabbergasted. I mean, my jaw hit the desk. I probably had a ghost white stare on. And he looks at me and he says, I know you're probably panicked or you don't know what to say right now. Don't worry, we're going to hook you up with an oncologist. You're free to go. And that was it. Wow. You're free to go. Like, that's what he said to me. And I was in shock, total shock. So I walk out of the office and my parents had landed already. And it was like, I mean, Sheila, was like divine timing. I can't even explain it. I get out of this building. this strange building in like the middle of nowhere. I have no idea where I'm at. And my phone rings and it's my mom. And she goes, "Oh, hey, I knew you had your appointment. I expected you to be in there a few hours, but we landed. I was just going to leave a message and let you know we're on our way in the car to your uncle's house," which is my mom's brother, where they were going to be staying. And she goes, but while I have you, how'd the appointment go? And I was like, about that appointment, Mom.
Yeah.
Let me tell you what the doctor said. And I tell you, Sheila, I mean, I had to tell her what he said, and it was like she was screaming, but it was dead silent on the other end of the phone. I can't even describe to
I
you
can't imagine as a mother hearing that. Yeah.
eerie silence. And
Mhm.
the only thing I remember hearing is my dad screaming, like he was on the other, must have been in the other seat in the car, in the back seat with her. And I could hear him like yelling, like, "Susan, Susan," which is my mom's name, like, "What's wrong?" Like even he knew something was wrong, and she was saying nothing. And so we met back at my uncle's house where they were going to be staying. And I mean, I'm a mama's boy. I hadn't been away from home that long ever in my life. And so like a month. And I mean, we gave each other big hugs and said some prayers and shed some tears. But it was an incredibly emotional time for me to get and way for me to be diagnosed with cancer.
Yeah.
And I'll continue the story, but at that point it was already pretty heavy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, even the fact of how they even just told you. I mean, I can't even imagine that
Yeah.
sitting there by yourself, an 18-year-old hearing that, and then okay, you can go. That's scary right there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But thank God your parents were there, so that you
Mm-hmm.
could you had them to lean on during
Yep.
that time. I mean, that's unbelievable.
Mm-hmm. It and I, now that I think about it, it probably could have even have been more taxing if they had diagnosed me before my parents got there. So
Right.
it was very, very taxing. So nonetheless, talking about generosity and the
Hmm.
things that went really well in my life at that point, my uncles, so my female cousin, we'll get to my male cousin in a moment, but my female cousin, my uncle's daughter, one of her best friends, and she was like in second grade at the point, was an oncologist, and he ended up kind of bending over backwards at his clinic
Hmm.
to be able to serve me and to take me in and to treat me. So we spoke
Okay.
with him right away. I think the next day we spoke with him, and he had already started laying out like test and treatment plans and things. And he told me one thing though, that I'll never forget the day. He said, "Don't drop out of your classes. Like if I'm going to treat you, you're staying in New York. You're not going home to Florida. And
Okay.
I don't want you to have nothing to do. So don't drop out of your classes." So I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." So that was Friday. Then Saturday, my uncle's best friend comes over his house. Now we don't know this guy, so this
Mm.
is critical to the story, Sheila. My uncle's best friend comes over, never met him. I mean, he lives in New York and we live in Florida, right? And so he comes into the house, he says hi to my aunt and uncle, and he walks like directly over to my parents as if he knew them, which he didn't. And he puts his hand in his pocket and he reaches out, and it looked like he was almost like punching my parents, but he like shoved his keys in their face.
Mhm.
And he aggressively said, "Bob, Susan, I can't imagine what you're going through with your son right now, but take my keys. You can have my car for as long as you need it." And he handed them my keys, and
Wow.
they were silent. I mean, they didn't know what to say. And I thought to myself, wow, that's the most generous thing
Mhm.
that someone's
Wow.
ever done for my family and I.
And you didn't know him? You
No,
got to wow.
I mean, he knew my uncle really well and my
Right.
aunt,
Yeah.
but he
Yeah.
didn't know us, didn't know me from Adam. And so, and he was there. I mean, he was there for maybe 15 minutes, Sheila. I mean, he's right after that, he said a few words, said goodbye to my aunt and uncle, and he left. And I was like, who is this guy? And my uncle was like, "Oh, that's Tim. Yeah, he's a really nice guy. He's known for being
Mhm.
generous." And I
Right.
didn't really think anything of it beyond that. That was it at the moment. I was like, just all the whirlwind of stuff going on. I couldn't even believe what was happening. So fast forward now a couple of days. That day was actually my Hofstra's first game that season. And so I
Mhm.
remember listening to it on the radio and trying to listen to that, and then all this stuff going through my head. It was just a crazy weekend. So, but the next week comes and I went to my first class on Monday, used Tim's car, went to some doctor's appointments. Tuesday morning comes now, and I went to my second ever college class. And I remember coming out of this class and being kind of hungry. So I went over to the cafeteria and I got a breakfast burrito. And I'm sitting at, I think it was like little like high top bar type of deal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm eating the burrito and I'm watching the news. Now, once again, I'm 18, I don't really watch the news and I don't even know the TV stations in New York. So whatever's on this like little 8-inch tube television that's,
Mm-hmm.
those TVs in public places that used to like hang on a bracket between the
Yes.
wall and the
Yeah.
ceiling. So I'm like squinting, I have 18-year-old healthy eyes, but I'm like squinting to watch TV, but I'm paying attention. And all of a sudden there's a plane crashes into a building. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, oh no, that's a terrible accident. Like how
Yeah.
horrible is that? So I actually called my dad and I said, hey dad, I'm grabbing something to eat. I'll be back to uncle's house in just a bit, but are you watching the news? And he's like, yeah, I'm watching. I just saw that accident. I was like, yeah, that's terrible. And we were talking for like maybe a minute and then bam,
A second.
another plane hit
Right.
another
Right.
tower there. We realized, wow, that's an attack on the
Right.
Twin Towers in Manhattan. And September 11th was happening at that moment. And it was like, oh my goodness, I can't even believe this is going on right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my uncle, my dad was like, you better get back to your uncle's house now. Like, this is not normal.
Mm-hmm.
So that breakfast burrito is probably still sitting there, Sheila. I mean, I sprinted out of that building. I mean, the groin injury was suddenly healed. Like I just,
And you were out. Yeah.
Man, I took off and I got in the car and it was typically a 15-minute drive from Hofstra to my uncle's house,
Mm-hmm.
but it took me 9 hours.
Where was you? Where was it? Where was your uncle? Was he not in Long Island? He was someplace else.
No. So I'll get to this. So that's another critical part of the story. So my aunt was home with the kid, with my cousins and the pets and everything, and my mom and dad. And subsequently, after all this happened, I got a master's degree in broadcast journalism, and I actually worked in AM radio, and I loved it. But most people don't listen to AM radio anymore. And even if you do, I doubt someone would listen to 9 straight hours of it. But I listened to the entire broadcast on AM radio of what was happening at September 11th, and burning towers way in the distance, like watching it all happen, listening to it in the chaos on the highway. And it was just nuts. And thankfully I made it off the highway before I actually ran out of gas. And it was in my uncle's neighborhood that my car stopped. And I was like, oh my goodness, I can imagine if I would have ran out of gas on the highway, forget about it.
I know. Wow.
Yeah. So we pushed my car into the driveway and, my parents were there and we kind of looked at each other like, man, like I was questioning my own existence just a couple of days ago. Now I'm questioning the existence of the world. Like, what is happening right now?
Yeah.
So my aunt was panicking though, because you asked about my uncle and he was on business the night before and he was supposed to fly home that morning to Manhattan and we couldn't get a hold of him. Finally at like, I don't know, 7:30 p.m. or so, he calls. He says, hey guys, just want to let you know I'm okay. I'm really sorry. I've been trying to get through all day, but the phones have been out. I'm stuck in Denver. I saw what happened, but I'm okay. I'm going to try to catch a flight tomorrow. And we were talking for a few minutes and we're getting ready to hang up the phone. But he was like, hey, but just real quick, before I let you go, I wanted to tell you that Tim, who you all met just a couple of days ago, he was in the towers this morning and he died.
Wow. Oh, wow. Wow.
And it was like, it just hits you like a ton of bricks. You're like, wait, Tim, you mean the guy who just gave us his car?
Oh, wow. Wow.
And we couldn't believe it. And so, well, it turns out that Tim worked for an investment banking firm called Cantor Fitzgerald. And if, anyone who's in the investment industry would definitely have heard of them before. And they had offices there in one of the towers and their entire staff that morning perished, except their leader, Howard Lutnick, who has one of the most emotional press conferences you will ever see. It's on YouTube. You can search it. You can, search CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald 9/11 press conference. And he was uncharacteristically out of the office that morning. Like he would usually be like the first guy there, but his wife was busy or something and he had to take the kids to school. And he was one of those people that were running down the street when the building started collapsing, like, and he survived. And it's just him talking about losing his whole staff is just, incredible. So Tim was one of those people on the staff there. And Cantor Fitzgerald was known for being super generous. In fact, they would donate office space to my uncle's foundation for cystic fibrosis, which is a disease that my other cousin has, who I mentioned a moment ago. And they were so generous of giving that office space to them. And luckily, everyone from the foundation wasn't typically in the office that early, except for Tammy, who was kind of the the lead organizer of everything over there at the time. And she actually got stuck in the subway underneath the tower that day and survived. But
Okay.
Sheila, the stories that she can tell are
Yeah.
just incredible. But it
Hmm.
makes you wonder. So Tammy was saved, but for some reason Tim was not, and it really hits me every day, like I mentioned before. But Tim was known for being this generous guy, and you know how people talk about FOMO, fear of missing out, or
Yeah.
YOLO, only live
Hmm.
once. They got all these
Hmm.
crazy acronyms thrown around
Yeah.
out there. Well, Tim would talk about apparently that you never know when your last opportunity to be generous to someone will be. And
Wow.
it just
Yeah.
turns out that his last opportunity to be generous to someone, he took advantage of it, and it was for our family.
Wow. 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 That's amazing. That's a very amazing story. It really is. It's very inspiring. And that's where you got the idea or the passion to do the same.
Well, it's interesting the question you ask. I've been asked it in many different ways over the years. And I think the best way I can describe it is that planted a seed
Hmm.
in me. And it took other episodes and things and contemplation and prayer and just experiences in my life to really germinate the seed and grow it. And now I'm hopefully planting others.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, without that period of time and what Tim did for us, I don't think I would have. And it was, I mean, I can't tell you how helpful that was, because throughout the next couple of months, Tim's car basically was critical, and because we couldn't get around in New York, we had to go into New York City a couple days after the attacks so I can get treatment. And
Really?
I have to, I have funny stories, I have sad stories, I have deep stories, I have shallow. I mean, I got everything of all of the next couple of weeks and months of things that happened, and most of it all happened because I was able to get there because of Tim and his car. Now, could we have gotten there some other way? Maybe, but the convenience that it provided for us and the
Yeah.
option to go to multiple clinics to get different tests done and really make the best decisions for my treatment is really owed to Tim and his family. And so, um, you know, that period of time definitely carved a little spot in my heart or my mind that I'm going to dive deeper into why and how people should be generous. And I've done that since. And, you know, I had an incredible opportunity a couple of years back at one of my cousin's weddings to speak with Tim's kids, who were just babies at the time that
Hmm.
happened. And having the opportunity to speak with them and just A, express my gratitude for what their father did,
Yeah.
but B, also tell them a little bit about the legacy that he's left, whether he intended to or not. I mean, it's just really, really powerful stuff. So, rest in peace, Tim, but everything that you
Yeah.
did or were about, I'm trying to share that with the world.
What are some specific ways you encourage people to find lessons and tragedies?
Oh man. So the first thing that comes to mind is that you have to be curious.
Yeah.
I think that's critical to anything, any pursuit in life. And if you're looking for lessons in the tragedies, a lot of times I think it can be hard to, well, just going through a tragedy on its own is hard,
Yeah.
but reflecting, thinking about it, journaling, like all those different practices that really help your mind, wrap your mind around what happened
Hmm.
can be hard to start, but I think it's much easier as you go on. So my first encouragement is to be curious about what actually happened, ask questions, reminisce, think about it, like don't run from it. And if it's hard to bring it back up, it doesn't mean you have to think about it all day or for hours at a time. Start
Hmm.
small,
Right.
5 minutes, start there. And second thing, and I mentioned journaling, but writing things down. I think writing things down is absolutely critical. I can't tell you how many lessons in my life have been learned by reading or like reminiscing about the same thing that I've thought about before, but it just hits you a different way at the right moment. And so if you write things down, you're much more likely to come back to them, read about it again.
Okay. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Um, when someone is struggling or having a difficult time, um, how how can they see the blessings in this situation though?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to say that there's no catch-all solution to this, but
Mhm.
I will tell you one of the things that helped me, and I did not even realize it while it was going on, But I've reminisced about this with my cousin now, and I mentioned he suffers from cystic fibrosis, which is a respiratory, digestive, reproductive disease. It's, it's very, very, depleting disorder, and they've come a long way. I mean, thank God that he's still alive, but married now with a kid and thriving well because of the work of the foundation and stuff. So praise God for that. But what I think is key when you talk about, like in relation to your question, is it's not necessarily about like in the moment that things are happening. I mean, it's very, very hard. You can't pause a tragedy to figure out what's good about it, right?
Right.
So
No.
I don't know if I have a solution. In fact, I will be honest, I don't have a solution for anyone who's right in the middle. Like when it flicks that it's an unexpected tragedy, I don't expect you to stop and say, oh, I remember Bob told me to do this. Like that's not a solution that I have.
Right.
But what I do have is you have to lean into the resources that you have in those moments, because I used to think that my cousin was annoying, and not in like I hate him, like I don't like him or would not want to be around him type of way, but in like he's my younger, like 10 years younger than me cousin. Like he's just annoying. And he would wake me up at like 6 in the morning, like the day after chemotherapy treatment, to like play video games, and he would be bugging me, and I used to think, I was like, man, like just let me sleep, or leave me alone for 5 minutes.
Like a younger sibling.
Yeah, exactly. The sibling that I never had because I'm an only child. And my parents gave up after me. They're like, that's enough. But it's critical to think about this, because he was just being himself and being friendly and enjoyed spending time with his older cousin. And I didn't realize it at the time, but even though it felt annoying initially, that camaraderie we developed, and sometimes it was wallowing in our sorrows. I mean, I was like throwing up and sick because I was taking chemo, and he was hacking up stuff and taking medication because he was dealing with his respiratory disorder. I mean, there were some dark moments when we were sitting there, like we sat down to play video games, but we couldn't even play video games because we were so sick. And it was like, and I thought in my mind at the time, it always started off as being an annoyance. But when we went back and reminisced it was almost 2 years ago now, I think we recorded this podcast, but we had this conversation that we had never really had with each other. And we had it recorded on a podcast. And I came to the realization that, and he had figured out that our parents were in cahoots. Like my uncle and my aunt were telling my mom and dad, like, how can we get them to like help each other? And they encouraged him. They're like, yeah, go wake him up, and he's going to say, let me go back to sleep, but build a bond together. Right. And so you ask the question, like, while people are in tragedy, what can help you get through? And I say it's lean into those people that care about you and want to be with you. And it's such a powerful force. So my cousin and my other family members really, really helped me during that time. And I look back at that, and I'm like, wow, without them, I can't imagine what I would have been. I was a physical wreck to begin with, but mentally I would have went off the deep end if I didn't have that connection with people in my family.
Yeah, the support, definitely. That's important. How do you approach spreading your message and inspiring others on a larger scale?
Well, I have a saying that I heard at a concert when I was younger, and it was another one of those things, like at the time, it didn't really hit me, but now I realize it. And that is the artist, the lead singer of this band, sat up there and he said, you may not change the world, but you may change the world for one. In other words, we're all not going to be, multi-continent, famous motivational speaker or, influencer type of thing. We're all not going to have a gazillion followers on Instagram or something. But every single person out there has gifts and skills that they can make someone else's world better. And that's the way I approach it. I listen to some people out there in the, internet, social media sphere, and they talk about, and believe me, I love goals and I appreciate aggressive goals. So they'll say, my goal is to teach 1 billion people about how to sell necklaces online, and whatever it is, their product or consultancy service they're selling. I'm going to reach 1 billion people. And God bless me and the mission and generosity and overcoming things. If we can reach 1 billion people, I think that is tremendous. But I don't put a number on it like that. The way I approach it is I try to take all of the smaller opportunities that I have and capitalize on as many of them as possible, because I think the consistency is a much more stronger and powerful force than just 1 or 2 big events.
Okay. Are there any specific projects or initiatives you are currently working on to further your mission?
Yes, well, there's two that I can think of. One is the podcast. I love
Okay.
speaking. I love talking. It's called Speaking of Impact, and I love talking with other people who have a similar mindset and people who have built something for impact, whether that's a nonprofit organization or even a for-profit company, but they've built it with the intention of helping other people in some way or another. And usually they've overcome something, and that's enabled them to figure out a system to be able to do this. So yes, that's the podcast. And then I'm really, really trying to speak to with as many organizations as possible. I mentioned my broadcasting career previously. Well, my career in the financial industry had prevented me for many years for compliance reasons of doing a lot of media appearances and speaking into a lot of
Right.
places. But I've since opened my own company now about 2.5 years ago, me and my business partner. So now my initiative is to get out there and do speaking. So if you're an organization, large or small, if you're a company that's looking to build cultures of generosity in your organization, I'm your guy. I have a couple keynote addresses that will help your organization build this collaborative culture. And I call it radical generosity equals radical growth.
Oh, radical generosity equals radical growth. I like that. I like that.
Good. I'm glad.
Well, before we close, this is one of the questions I like to ask everyone on my podcast.
Okay.
What are you grateful for?
Oh, I appreciate it. So can I just say that a friend of mine started calling gratitude vitamin G. So anytime I get this question, I talk about vitamin G. So
Vitamin G. Okay.
anyone out there can steal it. Make sure you get your vitamin G every day. And the number one thing I'm grateful for, Sheila, is life here because I almost lost it at 18.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I have my gratitude practice is not extravagant. You know, I think there's some people that have, like we talk about journaling or writing things on the wall or, you know, or talking about announcing it. Some people I know who they say the words of the things they're grateful for. And I believe in that. You know, my wife and I, we also pray about this too. So there's lots of practices and many of them are probably more time consuming and complicated than mine, but mine is very, very, very simple. The first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is I'm thankful that I woke up. So simple. But before I do anything, before I check my phone, even before I use the bathroom, get a drink, roll out of bed, anything, I open my eyes and I'm like, thank God I'm alive. And that alone, I'm telling you, I know that this might seem, I told you, I don't exaggerate anything. Totally true. That alone really gives me great perspective for every day. Does it make every day perfect? No. But it makes me realize that just the opportunity to get out of bed and do what I do is such a blessing.
It's a blessing. That's so true because, you know, there's a lot of people who don't have that opportunity, you know, so we have to be thankful. And I appreciate you, Bob. I thank you for coming on and sharing your story. And again, let my listeners know where they can, if you know your website, where they can reach out to you. I know you wrote a book, right? Is that the book behind you, Personal Finance?
Yeah, that is my book, Personal Finance in a Public World. It's all about digital ads, social media, and how that affects our money decisions. So
okay.
And there's a twist at the end.
What's your website again?
It's bobdepasquale.com. You can find the podcast, the book, my social handles, my DMs are always open. Everything's on bobdepasquale.com.
Well, Bob, your story serves as a powerful reminder that even in the face of adversity, we have the ability to create positive change. And it has been an honor to have you on my podcast. And I hope that you continue spreading your message of hope and impact and generosity. I really do. And I thank you so much for taking the opportunity to just stop by and share your story and your journey and
I'm
inspiration.
Incredibly grateful for the opportunity, Sheila. Thank you so much. And best of luck with the continued mission that you're on.
Thank you so much. Join me next time where I will continue to discuss more of today's issues. I'm your host, Sheila Dunbar. Blessings to you.